Today on UpFront, we're hosting something you don't often see on television, a debate between two people who for decades served at the forefront of Iranian and US national security policymaking. Here with me today are Sayed Hossein Mousavian, the former head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Iran's National Security Council and a close ally of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, and retired US Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, who served in the Pentagon and the State Department under US President George W. Bush and was chief military spokesman for coalition forces in Iraq after the invasion. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me on UpFront. Let me start with you, Sayed Hossein Mousavian. It's a question that's been on a lot of people's minds since the new year. The United States, Donald Trump, ordered the assassination, the killing of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, Iraq. Trump described him as an imminent threat, as justification for that attack. What was your reaction when you heard the news of that attack?
I personally was shocked because when President Trump came to office, he practically started economic war, political war, security war. But I could not imagine he would go to open the chapter of military confrontation and the face of military strike. When he attacked General Soleimani, it was practically the beginning of military confrontation between Iran and the US, because Iran also responded by attacking the American bases in Iraq. The second issue, I was really shocked because I was in Tehran. And I personally attended the funeral of General Soleimani. And I personally was really, really shocked. 7 million people, they came to the streets of Tehran.
Okay. Mark Kimmitt, was it justified for the US president to order the killing of this Iranian general who a lot of Americans from both administrations, Democrat and Republican, had their eye on for a while?
Well, first of all, I think we need to clarify some of the terms. It was not an assassination. It was a death on the battlefield of a military combatant. If we go back to the record of what General Soleimani has either done personally or been responsible for, on the issue of Americans alone, he was responsible for providing explosively formed penetrator IEDs into Iraq, 600 plus Americans killed, thousands wounded. We've seen what's happened to Syria under his tutelage with the Quds Force, responsible for tens of thousands, particularly civilians. So I think in terms of a military combatant that was conducting military operations against an enemy, that was a battlefield consequence of a battlefield decision on his part, and it was a battlefield death.
So when Vicky Duvall, former general counsel at the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, former assistant general counsel at the CIA, she says that it was a homicide under federal law because the presidents can't just kill people who they don't like or who are bad people, because the president called it imminent threat. You're not using that argument as justification for killing.
No, I think that the president has wide power on the issue. Article 2 of the Constitution gives him that responsibility. He also has the responsibility for the safety and protection of American people against threats to the homeland. And there were the rules of engagement currently operating inside of Iraq that all of our soldiers were operating under, which would have given a foreign military enemy in uniform a legitimate battlefield target.
Legitimate battlefield target, Sayed Hossein Mousavian.
I think it is generally now, and there is a common understanding internationally that this was an act of war against Iran. And this was completely illegal. President Trump has designated Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. Yes. In response, Iran has designated CENTCOM and the US Army as terrorist organization, right?
Yeah.
They both have tens of thousands of members. If this is legitimate, that Americans, they kill Revolutionary Guard members in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Therefore, this would give legitimacy to Iranians, they kill Americans in the Middle East.
Do you agree with that assessment, Mark?
Because then Iranians, they would say, yes, we are killing the terrorists. Then tens of thousands...
So tit for tat is what you're saying.
Tit for tat.
Mark?
Well, in fact, I think that's already happened. When the Iranian military supported, the Quds Force supported Iraqi proxies that killed an American contractor at K2, that's really what led to all of this. And I think it's important to recognize...
Just before the new year.
Just before the new year. I think it's important to recognize that for months and months, remarkably, President Trump had showed a tremendous amount of restraint not reacting to the attack on the tankers inside the Gulf, not reacting to the Abqaiq attack, not reacting to the shoot down of the American drone. I've sat in Baghdad many nights and heard rockets being fired into the green zone, which were by Iranian-backed proxies. So I think we've got to understand and go back to, if this is in fact devolving into war, which I don't believe that to be the case, I think there needs to be some circumspect assessment of what has led to this. And it wasn't only until an American was killed did President Trump feel it necessary to act.
You say you don't think it's devolving into open war. I did want to ask you both, and you've answered the question before I asked it, so let me ask you, do you agree with Mark? How worried are you about open war? People were talking about a major war.
I'm seriously worried, because there are some specific countries who have been pushing U.S. for years and years and years to attack Iran.
Which countries are those?
You know Saudi Arabia, you know Israel. I don't know.
Were you nodding and saying yes when you said that just now?
I think that there has been a desire on the part of some of the American allies inside the region to go against the source of instability in the region.
The source of instabilities are wars in the region. Saddam attacked Iran. The U.S. supported. Arabs, they supported. Saddam attacked Kuwait. Iran was against the attack of Saddam. The U.S. attacked Iraq. The U.S. attacked Afghanistan. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia attacked Yemen. And the Arab countries with the NATO, they attacked Libya. 7, 8 wars in this region brought this region at the verge of total collapse.
Okay.
Failed state.
I've got to throw this in here, though. You mentioned wars in the region. The biggest war in the region in recent years has been the Syrian war, which the Iranians, which Iran has been heavily involved on the side doing most of the killing.
But maybe don't make a mistake. The others, frankly speaking, the others, the U.S., Europe, Saudi Arabia, the others, they were going to bring a legal regime in Syria down.
We don't have time to re-prosecute the Syrian war. All I'm saying is that Iran has been heavily involved in a very bloody and brutal war in Syria, helping Bashar al-Assad kill a lot of people, including the late Qasem Soleimani was involved in that.
Iran supported a legal government to prevent regime change by tens of thousands of terrorists.
Let me bring in Mark here. How do you feel, Mark, about the fact that the U.S. government killed General Qasem Soleimani, a man who, for all the litany of things, bad things he did, which you mentioned at the start of the show, helped the U.S. defeat ISIL in Iraq? How do you feel about the fact that ISIL actually celebrated the U.S. killing of Qasem Soleimani?
Well, I think we've also got to acknowledge that Qasem Soleimani had been extraordinarily helpful to us at the early days of our operations inside of Afghanistan. But I would just simply ask the 600-plus families that have lost a father, a son, a brother, an uncle, who died because of the military operations conducted by Qasem Soleimani. I think that they would give a resounding, it was better that he became a battlefield casualty. And
even if ISIL is helped by that?
ISIL will not be helped by this. I would tell you that right now that inside of Iraq, the Iranian-based Iraqi proxies, the PMFs, the Hashid, have done a brilliant job as the leading edge of the operation against ISIL. That will continue.
I just want to mention to you, Sayyid Hussein, a 2014 document from Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security, which was revealed recently by a joint New York Times Intercept investigation, had Iranian intelligence officials worrying in private about the brutality of some of Soleimani's militias in Iraq, saying that it could backfire on Iran.
Actually, about the document, I really don't know about the document, about whether this is correct or fake, but the Iranian intelligence organizations, they all said this is a fake document, one. But second, there is a fact. Mark, I think you would accept that Iraqi officials, frequently they said, without Iranian support, Baghdad would have collapsed in the hand of ISIS, Erbil would have collapsed, Kirkuk would have collapsed. Iraqi military, Iraqi prime minister, foreign minister, they all said without Quds support,
And yet, prior to Soleimani's death, in the days running up to Soleimani's death, the Iranian consulate was burned down in Najaf by Iraqi Shia protesters. Iran wasn't popular in Iraq until...
No. I mean, the attacks, I'm really, frankly speaking, I'm very suspicious.
Multiple protests across Iraq against Iran. It's all a conspiracy?
I'm very much suspicious about
So you don't think there's
attacks.
anti-Iranian feeling amongst Iraqis?
There may be, but...
Not maybe, there clearly is. I mean, you see them on the streets.
Mehdi, look at the realities. The reality is that Qasem Soleimani funeral in Karbala, in Najaf, in Baghdad, millions of people, of Iraqis attended. Millions of Iraqis. Therefore, they consider him as a hero.
Listen, I'll be the first to admit, we would have liked General Qasem Soleimani on our side. He was a brilliant officer. He was a brilliant tactician. He had been helpful with us in Afghanistan. It was unfortunate that he made the choice to turn his activities against the Americans in the early 2005-2006 period. We watched what he was able to do with the Popular Mobilization Forces. I will be the first to sit at this table saying that when the fatwa came out to form the Popular Mobilization Forces, I was happy. I was in Baghdad at that time. It was the Hashid that held back ISIS. But once the fight was over, it took on a completely different complexion. And unfortunately, Qasem Soleimani made the choice, both in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Yemen and elsewhere in the region, to be a destabilizing factor with his Quds force. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't work together the way we had in the past.
Mark, let's ask you a question. You sit on the seat of Qasem Soleimani, right? You correctly said, Qasem cooperated, helped the U.S. to win the war on terror in Afghanistan, to defeat the ISIS. When he helped, Iranian generals, they sat with American generals, and Taliban was defeated. What was the U.S. reaction? The U.S. president 2 weeks after said Iran is the axis of evil. If Iran is supposed to cooperate, and then you reward Iran as axis of evil, would you continue?
I don't think at that point, I may not have continued, but I wouldn't have turned the tables to where I would start killing American soldiers as a result.
Let me just take a step back, because we're out of time, but I do want to ask you both this question, since I've got you both here at the table. Can we, you're having a very reasonable conversation here today, can we agree, because right now there's a lot of people in your country who want to demonize his country, there's a lot of people in your country who want to demonize his country, and I'm just wondering, we often hear grievances being put forward in a vacuum. So we hear the Iranians talk about the CIA coup against Mossadegh in 1953, support for the Shah, support for Saddam against Iran, sanctions today, which is a big complaint of the Iranians about the very destabilizing sanctions and are hurting a lot of Iranians. But then we hear from the Americans about the hostage crisis and the taking of American hostages, the support for Hamas and Hezbollah, attacks on American soldiers in Iraq. Would you both recognize
the killing of 241 Marines at the Marine bombing?
The Marine bombings, and then the Iranians say the killing of 200 people on a civilian airliner in 1988. It goes back and forth. I'm just wondering, would you both recognize that both sides have legitimate grievances against the other?
I have explained in my book American grievances in full text. Iran and the U.S.
But you accept American grievances are legitimate grievances against Iran?
This is their own view, and we have to respect. I mean, they say...
That's not what I asked, I said. Are they legitimate grievances?
I don't know whether it's legitimate or not, because the U.S. was supporting Shah for 25 years, and a dictator, a corrupted regime. And
well, that's your grievance. I asked you about the American grievances, hostage crisis,
but my issue,
American barracks, Hamas, Hezbollah.
My issue always, I have written, I have said, we need to have understanding about the grievances of the other side. We need to respect, and we need to find a solution.
Mark, would you agree with that?
And that's exactly why I believe Iran should accept the offer of the United States to sit down at a negotiating table and restart these discussions so that we can put these grievances on the table and come to a solution.
But you recognize that those are legitimate grievances from the Iranians when they talk about the CIA coup, when they talk about civilian act, because you don't often hear that much about it in the US discussion about Iran.
If countries didn't have grievances with each other, they wouldn't need a State Department, they wouldn't need a diplomatic corps, they wouldn't need militaries.
But Mark, you know, the US-Iran relationship is a particularly long-standing, toxic one. I'm just saying it seems to be one-sided from both sides. It would be helpful if both sides recognize that the others have legitimate grievances.
I have not ever said that I can understand the Iranian views towards the Americans. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's why we need to sit down
I
and
think
have those
understanding is
discussions.
important.
Okay. On that note, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both for coming on UpFront to have this conversation. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.